I'm Alice White and I'm a full member of the SGFA, the only UK society dedicated to the art of drawing. Drawing is a communication tool which we use to observe, describe and respond to the world around us. And I see drawing as a form of exploration whereby we uncover not just how things look, but how they make us feel, how they make us think, and even relate to each other. And that idea of exploration is actually key to how I make my work. My artworks celebrate the diversity of wildlife in and around UK waters. Last year, I was awarded the Time Space Money Bursary by AN, the Artist Information Company, and the Arts Council England. And that bursary allowed me to set up a new space and begin work on the Back to Life project. The Back to Life project is a positive response to change through artwork. The project actually documents the surge in wildlife that we saw during the pandemic, that burst of flora and fauna. And I documented this in local natural spaces like the River Lee, Downhills Park and Walthamstow wetlands, all of which are local to my own studio. Looking at that regeneration actually echoes my own story as I'm beginning to reshape and rethink my studio practice after this period of prolonged change. Now, Puddle Duck, which you'll see at the exhibition, is a signature piece from that Back to Life series. It's a local species of waterfowl, which I encountered whilst I was hunting for imagery along the canal nearby to my studio. And what caught me about this Puddle Duck was a playful attitude. He had this beady, watchful eye, and I thought he was a perfect candidate for drawing. And I'd like to show you a little bit about how I made that piece now. Here it is, Puddle Duck, which you'll see on display at the Mall Galleries this summer. I created this piece using a combination of gouache and ink on Canson paper. Let's zoom in to look at a couple of the details. Now, all of those of you who have done drawing at any time will know that the use of lines, either straighter lines like these that are running on the diagonal in parallel to each other, or these slightly more broken up marks, all add something to the piece. I was using a dip pen and nib with this. So one of those calligraphy nibs that you'll perhaps remember from early on in school, dipping it into Indian ink, which I've slightly watered down. So instead of getting a very intense black, I've created a few different tones, a darker grey here and slightly lighter greys that I've used in the rest of the body of the goose. The line work is used to create structure in the body of the animal. So here, these rather more rigid, straight lines running in parallel give the wing, the top of the wing, a slightly stiffer look. And that's useful to create a sense of sort of boniness on that sort of more rigid structure there. But as I'm working towards the tail feathers, you'll see that line starts to curve and sort of break down really into these lovely sort of pooling puddles. And I'm actually doing that on purpose. So I'm creating a contrast between rigid lines for rigid structure and looser lines for looser, indeed more feathery structure. And this is something I'm continuing in the body of the goose. You'll see those lines begin to start to break down around here, around the back, until they really become almost like handwriting, just spare lines that are looping and arcing and undulating, becoming almost disconnected from each other in the belly of the goose here. And what that does is it creates a sense of looseness, fluffiness, and a little bit of movement. So all of that different contrasting use of line work is something I'm trying to use rapidly and quickly in the studio to create the liveliness of the goose and the structure of his body as a whole. This is something I'm repeating in the area of the head, where actually I'm flipping the contrast here. So where the body of the duck is quite loose, and I had quite a lot of fun here actually with these bits of broken line work, that is to say line work that isn't joined up. Here in the head, I'm doing the opposite. I'm making very clear inscribed marks to create the rigid structure, the bonier structure of the head, and to get that detail in the tender front section of the beak and around that staring beady eye. And all of this sort of comes together on the page. The other thing you'll notice that I'm doing in addition to that line work is this use of a brush with the ink itself. So I've applied these wider applications of tone using a soft brush. And in this instance, I've actually mixed together a combination of watered down ink with gouache. That's why we've got this interesting sort of grey pink colour here. So the gouache is pink originally, you can see it in the beak and in the eye. And then I've actually mixed them together in the palette and just run them right over the top of my line work. And again, the use of that wet, broad mark brings together these disparate little areas of tone and adds again to that fluffiness, that featheriness in the downy body of the animal. I've used the same grey pink in the feet of the duck here. I had quite good fun with that. And again, I have purposefully allowed the line work to blur and to bleed into the feet because I want to create the impression this bird is wet, which he did have very wet feet because he'd just come out of the canal. Finally, in the puddle, I've allowed the ink and the gouache to really bleed and bloom and run together on that page to create the sensation again of that wetness, because the path was particularly wet on the day that I went down and found this chap hanging out in Tottenham. We also see a little bit of a spatter over here, and over here, where I've just run my finger across the edge of the brush and allowed that inky, gouache substance to splay out onto the page. And again, that's something I've done on purpose to create a sense of immediacy and splashiness, because the duck had a lot of motion and he did turn and look a little startled as I walked past. I hope this explanation has helped reveal a few little things that I've enjoyed about making this piece, and hopefully it might inspire you with some of your artwork. So drawing is a way to make connections between the outside world and our own inner world, which is often so much more hidden. I hope you'll join us from the 5th to the 11th of July at the Mall Galleries in London for a truly creative celebration.